Hello and welcome to my channel, Reveal and Review. Now in this video it's a little bit different. I kind of wanted to talk about the passing of the three 80s icons that happened a couple of weeks ago. That being Malcolm Jamal Warner, Hulk Hogan, and Ozzy Osbourne. Now chances are if you were a kid in the 80s like I was, I grew up in the 80s. I was 11 years old in 1980, so I did most of my growing up in the 80s. Child of the 70s, teen of the 80s, as they say. And chances are, if you were a child or a teenager in the 80s, at least one, if not more, of these three people had an effect on you. Now, Malcolm Jamal Warner, for me, yeah, I watched The Cosby Show, like everybody else did back then. There was only 3 channels back then in the 80s. Pretty much, well, I guess not. I guess by then we'd gotten cable. But anyway, I watched The Cosby Show like everybody else did. And Malcolm Jamal Warner, he hadn't really done much since The Cosby Show. Maybe he worked behind the scenes, but I hadn't seen him in anything up until he'd done a couple acting jobs. He was in a show called The Resident a couple of years ago, and that ended a couple of years ago. He was in that for about maybe 2 or 3 seasons. And that was the first thing I'd seen him in years, I think, since The Cosby Show. So his passing didn't really affect me that much. I was a little bit of a Hulk Hogan fan. I followed wrestling when I was a kid, up until when I was probably about, my early 20s. Then I just kind of got tired of it, I guess. I guess a lot of the guys that I liked kind of retired and got out of it, and so when the new guys came along, I didn't really follow it as much. So I hadn't followed wrestling since probably the early 90s, maybe. Maybe a little bit longer than that, but maybe basically the early 90s. But I got to tell you, Ozzy Osbourne, that was my guy. My 2 favorite bands growing up were, and still now, are Van Halen and Ozzy. Well, and this band named Ginger too, but I won't talk about them right now. But it was a different time when I grew up, like in the 70s and 80s. We didn't have the internet, and really the only thing you had was your circle of friends at school and your parents. And so up until about 7th grade, the only thing I was exposed to what my parents liked. And I had, in 6th grade, I had started discovering a little bit of my own musical taste. I remember having the Queen the Game album, and another one, Bites the Dust, was a favorite of mine when I was a little kid, when I was probably about, I wasn't a little kid, I was 11 or 12. And I had stuff like REO Speedwagon and Styx, but nothing that could be considered offensive to parents. And so when I got to 7th grade, there's more people in junior high than there is in elementary school, and your musical and all your other horizons kind of broaden a little bit. And I have to say, going into 7th grade, I'd never heard of Ozzy Osbourne, had no idea who he was, had no idea who Black Sabbath was. I had been exposed mostly to things like Elvis and the Beach Boys and things like that, things that my parents liked. So, it'd been a few months into 7th grade maybe, everybody started talking about Ozzy Osbourne, the concert's coming, are you going to Ozzy Osbourne? And I was, no, I'd never been to any concert before, much less something like that. And I had no idea who it was anyway. I had started listening a little bit to the radio. There was one radio station where I live that that played that kind of music, and 1 or 2 radio stations, and I started listening to that a little bit. I was familiar a little bit with Ted Nugent and Journey and Styx and REO Speedwagon, and I think I'd heard 1 or 2 Ozzy songs, but I wasn't real familiar with him. So everybody's all, you're going to Ozzy, or you're going to Ozzy. And literally, like, the concert came, and the next day, literally probably there was about 500 people that went to my junior high, and I'd say probably at least 200 of them had an Ozzy shirt on from the concert that next day. And it was that it was the Diary of a Madman tour, and it was that classic Diary of a Madman pose where he's all, his hair's all teased up, and he's got the ripped up pants, and he looks all crazy, and he's all white in the face and bloody. And I was like, whoa, that looks pretty cool, I'd want to check that out. So I went to the store, and I looked a little bit into his albums, and I kind of hesitated to buy him. I had an allowance, and I could have saved up to buy him, but I'm like, yeah, my parents will probably kill me if I get that. So I never did buy any. So I kind of put it in the back of my mind, and in the early 80s when MTV first started, they had a show called the Saturday Night Concert. And I used to watch it all the time. They had things like Rush, and it's the only other one I can remember besides the Ozzy concert. And I saw in the TV guide that it was going to be this Ozzy Osbourne Diary of a Madman tour was going to be on the Saturday Night Concert on MTV. So I'm like, all right, I'm watching that. I'm not doing anything else with my friends that night. I'm going to watch that and see what this guy's all about. So I watched it, and I was completely blown away. Every song, the way he looked, the way he acted, every song was just great. And that's the classic one, I think now it's called the Speak of the Devil tour, where he's got the blue sweats and no shirt on most of the concert, and the blonde hair. And so I went out, and I risked it. I figured, the heck with it, I'll have this cassette. You bought cassettes back then. And so I think the first one I bought was, even though Diary of a Madman had a cooler cover on it, I thought at the time, people told me Blizzard of Oz was a little bit better of an album. So I got Blizzard of Oz. And I was just blown away. And from that minute on, from the moment I saw that concert, I was an Ozzy fan. And so I watched the concert, and I ended up, I bought the Blizzard of Oz, then I bought Diary of a Madman next. That was also, I didn't like that one quite as much, but it was pretty good also. And so I wanted the Bark at the Moon album. I remember one year, I think, for my birthday. And I told my dad about it. And my dad just laughed and laughed. You want what? Bark at the what? Ozzy who? And he had never heard of him. And I had no idea that Ozzy, I remember thinking when I watched that concert that, wow, this guy's cool, but he's a little bit old. He looks a little bit old to just now be making it. Just now be this popular. He's awful popular. And I had no idea that he'd already been with Black Sabbath at that point. It was 1981 or 82 when that concert was on. So I had no idea he'd already been with Black Sabbath for 10 years and had gotten away from them and was doing a solo career. So anyway, back to this story. I wanted the Bark at the Moon album. And I told my dad, and he just laughed and laughed and laughed, and other family members just laughed and laughed. And I ended up getting it. I think he got it for me for Christmas. He said he couldn't keep a straight. I remember him saying he couldn't keep a straight face when he went into the record store, because that's where you bought music back then, was a record store. And he said he couldn't keep a straight face asking the guy if they had Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne. And he just laughed, and for years and years he laughed every time that got brought up. Every Christmas, oh, are you enjoying that Bark at the Moon album? And he would just laugh and laugh and laugh. And so that was one story. And back then they had a thing called backmasking, I think it was, where if you played a record backwards, it would say evil things other than the words of the song. And of course, the religious people were all over it. Oh, it's evil. They put subliminal messages and evil messages when, the Satan worshipers play the record backwards and get messages. And of course, the bands all denied this. But I was in my living room one night, and we had a record player. And of course, because I had a record, so I had to have something to play it on. I actually had one in my room, and we had one for the family. But I was home by myself, and I decided I'm going to see if this record says anything backwards. So I put on Bark at the Moon, and I just spun it with my fingers like this, and it said something. I about crapped my pants, but I swear it wasn't my 14 or 15-year-old ears playing tricks on me. It said something backwards when I played it backwards with my finger. And it wasn't Ozzy's voice. It was this strange, screechy voice, kind of at half speed because I was playing it with my finger. But what it said was, I am Satan, I am in hell, please help me, get me out of this place, I'll do anything. And that was enough for me. But I swear it said that. I don't know if anybody else can collaborate that in the content, or confirm that in the comments. But I tried it, I played it backwards, and that's what it said, and I quit after that. I was scared, it scared me, and I thought about that for days. I thought about that. And I got kind of scared. I was freaked out. I was glad when my parents came home that night. But I never told them I did that, though. So that's kind of another story. Then in high school later on, in '86, I live in kind of a small market, so for concerts. So Ozzy didn't come here every tour. He's been here 4 times. Of course, he came here for the Diary of a Madman tour. Then the next time he came was the Ultimate Sin tour in '86, and that was the one where he came, that monster-looking thing that kind of looked like him came down from above, and it had its arms closed, and it opened up its arms, and he was sitting in it, and that was a cool concert. I saw him again in '92 on the Diary of a Madman, or not Diary of a Madman, on the No More Tears tour, and that one was a little bit more subdued, but the Ultimate Sin tour in '86 was right in the middle of the 80's excess, probably when he was doing more drugs and all that, and he just was nuts every song, running around the stage, couldn't be stopped, and that was an awesome concert. Great light show, great everything about it from beginning to end. And then the No More Tears tour, I thought it was a little bit more subdued. He kind of started to quit doing drugs by then a little bit, or at least try to, even though he may not have succeeded all that well. He was trying to, and they kind of changed his image from when that album came out. I remember they changed his image from more of like an evil demon type guy to like more of an aging hippie rocker type guy, to like an aging hippie type vibe. And so that concert was good, and I liked the No More Tears album, but it wasn't as good as that '86 concert. That was my favorite Ozzy concert that I saw. But like I said, I only saw him twice. So, the only other story that I have, it's not really an Ozzy story, or it's kind of a Black Sabbath story. That's why I included it in the title. I met Ronnie James Dio once, and I saw him. There was this concert series at this bar that held like 15,000 people, and there was this concert series that cost, the radio station was 96 something on the dial, and it cost 96 cents to get into this concert. And I can only assume that the bands got a piece of the alcohol sales, because I'm sure when they sell out, the place held like 1,500 people, and all the concerts I saw during that series were sold out, so I'm sure they sold a lot of drinks. But anyway, I saw Dio, and that guy can sing. I'll tell you what, that guy can sing his face off live, and he sounds just like he does on the records. It wasn't any recording or anything like that, but he can sing his face off. And so I saw him, and I was walking back. The show was over. I was walking back to my car, and I look around, and his tour bus was parked off to the side of the building, and there was a big crowd of people around it. So I was like, "Oh, what's this?" So I head over there. I go up to his tour bus, and there's Dio signing. I go up to the crowd, and there's Dio standing there signing autographs. So the only thing I had was my ticket stub, and I still have it, but I'm not going to show it on here because I just don't want to show it on here. So anyway, I go up there and I wait my turn in line, and there's a bunch of drunk people, and it was back in my drinking days. I don't drink anymore, but I did back then, and I'd had a few beers, and I was just kind of enjoying listening to people talk, but everybody was drunk that was talking to him, and you could tell, you know, he wasn't getting annoyed. He was super, super friendly to everybody. And I thought that was really cool. So I go up to him, and I couldn't think of anything to say because, like I say, I was kind of drunk, and I didn't want to look like an idiot like half the other people that were in line. So I get up to him, and he's like, "What's your name?" And told him my name. I told him my name was Mike. My name is Mike. And he goes, "Magic." And I said, "Yeah." That's all I could think to say. You're in the presence of a legend. What are you going to do? So he signed all I had was the ticket stub, and he signed that. And the thing that struck me about meeting him, he was super friendly. I think I shook his hand, if I remember right. And that was pretty much all I said to him, all I had to say. And couldn't think anything else to say. But the thing that struck me is I'm only 5 foot tall. And he, I swear, was about up to here on me. He was really, really short. And if you look at his videos, they're usually shot close up, or if they're from further away, they're from an angle that's up, like an upward angle. And they do that because when people are really short, it doesn't show how short they are. Same thing with the guy from the Scorpions. I never met him, but I heard he was real short too. So anyway, I met Dio. That was really cool. And he was really cool. He was just standing out there, not charging any money for it or anything. And just, just signing autographs and talking to people, just chill. And I thought that was really cool. And I also met Brad Gillis, who played with Ozzy on part of the Diary of a Madman tour after Randy Rhoads' passing, and also on the Speak of the Devil live album that Ozzy did. So how I met him was there was a Night Ranger concert after he did his thing with Ozzy, played with Ozzy on that one tour, was all he ever played for him on. He was in Night Ranger. He had a band called Night Ranger. I'm sure if you're watching this video, you know who Night Ranger is. So there was, in this same concert series where it was 96 cents to get in, Night Ranger came to town one night. So I go to see Night Ranger. And it kind of sucked because Brad Gillis was there, but it was a different singer. So tried to sound like him, but wasn't as good. But anyway, I had no idea they were going to do autograph signings after the show, or I would have brought my Speak of the Devil album. I have, by the way, every Ozzy Osbourne CD, every Black Sabbath CD, every DVD they ever put out, every Blu-ray, every concert. Every tour, they put a concert DVD out. And I have all those. I have all the velvet blacklight posters. I have 4 of those carnival mirrors. The Blizzard of Oz one, the Diary of a Madman one, which are just, I have a big Blizzard of Oz one. I have just a small Diary of a Madman one. And I have a big one of the Executioner, where it's an executioner's got an axe and he's holding Ozzy's head up and it's dripping blood. And so I have a big one of those. I have another Ozzy Carnival mirror that looks like it was kind of homemade. It just says Ozzy on it in blue and it's on a mirror. But I got them all off eBay at one time or another. And no, they're not for sale. None of the blacklight posters are for sale. I got lucky and got those. I came across someone that had the Blizzard of Oz and the Diary of a Madman blacklight poster from the 80s. Brand new in the wrapper. He said his parents or his grandparents had owned a store in the 80s, some kind of a store that carried them, and they had a bunch of merchandise in their basement. And when they died, he inherited all the merchandise and he was selling it off on eBay. They kept it in their basement all those years and forgot about it, I guess. But anyway, I've got all that stuff. But anyway, how I met Brad Gillis, Night Ranger came to town, and I had no idea that they were gonna do signings after, or I would have brought my Speak of the Devil record. I have a record of that too. But I wait in line, and the funny thing was, every question, he was there for Night Ranger, nothing to do with Ozzy. But I kind of, I could hear people talking to him, and every question was about what was it like to work with Ozzy. Nothing about Night Ranger. And, Night Ranger was a big group. They had big hits all through the 80s, once he got with them. All through the 80s and early 90s. But it was funny. Every question was about Ozzy. Something about Ozzy. What was that tour like? What was it like to work with Ozzy? And his answer was, it was great, but he was drinking too much. And that's all he would say about that. So when I get up there, I ask him, all I could find, I was scrapping around, I was looking around for something to have him sign, and there were posters on the table, not posters, but sheets of paper advertising the Night Ranger concert on the tables. So I got one of those and I had him sign that. But my question to him was, at the time, the Diary of a Madman tour or Speak of the Devil video DVD that they have now hadn't been released. And I asked him, I said, has that been released in America on a DVD? The guy said, all I've ever seen it is in Japan on a laser disc. On a Japanese laser disc. Not in Japan, I've never been to Japan, but I'd seen a Japanese laser disc. And he said, well, he goes, I got a copy of it, but no, I don't think it's ever been released in America on a DVD. So I waited years, and I ended up finding it on eBay, so I had that anyway. But that's kind of my Brad Gillis, meeting Brad Gillis story. He was really cool, answered everybody's Ozzy question, even though he was there for Night Ranger, didn't get frustrated with anybody, any of the drunks that were talking to him, anything like that. So he was really cool to meet. And so I do, and also I wanted to mention the overwhelming response to Ozzy's death. I mean, he was a worldwide celebrity, and I don't remember any celebrity other than a president, any other person other than a president, where they shut down the streets, had a procession of his funeral through the streets, and shown it on CNN. I don't remember even when, like, John Lennon died. The only people, I don't remember him doing it for him. I was just a little kid. I was like 11 years old when he died, when John Lennon died. But I remember it being a big deal to my parents when he died. But, George Harrison's died since then, and I don't remember any musical celebrity, Kurt Cobain or anybody, or any other actor or anything, sports star, that they've closed down the streets and had a procession through the streets and shown it on CNN. Only other some people I know them that they do that for is, that I've ever seen them do that for, is ex-presidents when they die. So that was amazing. So hope you enjoyed this video. I just kind of felt like Ozzy is as important as he was to my childhood and my teen years. And even now, he's one of my favorite musical people. I just felt like he deserved a video on my channel. And so that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. And rest in peace, Ozzy. You'll be missed. For sure.